The forest breathed with malevolent intent as the research team's vehicles crawled deeper into the ancient wilderness, their headlights cutting through darkness so thick it seemed to swallow light itself. Dr. Sarachan pressed her face against the passenger window, watching twisted branches claw at the sky like skeletal fingers reaching for salvation that would never come. The expedition had been planned for months, a comprehensive study of the remote Blackwood Forest's ecosystem, but now, surrounded by towering pines that whispered secrets in languages older than human civilization, she wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. The lead vehicle's radio crackled with static, then fell silent. Behind them, the convoy of 3 trucks carrying equipment, supplies, and 8 researchers wound through the serpentine dirt road that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. Local authorities had warned them about the forest's reputation, speaking in hushed tones about disappearances dating back to the 1800s, but science demanded evidence, not superstition. As they rounded a sharp bend, their headlights illuminated something that made the driver slam on the brakes. There, standing in the middle of the road, was a massive black bear. But this was no ordinary creature. Its fur seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating a void-like silhouette against the forest backdrop. Most disturbing were its eyes, not the typical brown or black of a bear, but a sickly, phosphorescent green that pulsed with an otherworldly intelligence. The bear didn't move as the vehicles approached. It simply stood there, watching them with those terrible glowing orbs, its massive head tilted at an unnatural angle. The lead driver honked the horn, but the sound seemed muffled, as if the forest itself was absorbing the noise. The bear's mouth opened slightly, revealing teeth that gleamed like polished bone in the artificial light. Then, without warning, it vanished. Not fled, vanished. One moment it was there, solid and imposing, the next it had simply ceased to exist, leaving only the empty road and the oppressive weight of unseen eyes watching from the darkness between the trees. The convoy continued in uneasy silence until they reached their designated campsite, a clearing that had been used by researchers for decades. As they began unloading equipment, the forest around them seemed to pulse with a malevolent heartbeat. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, every distant call of a night bird felt charged with menace. The team worked quickly to establish their base camp, setting up tents, research stations, and a central fire pit. But as darkness deepened, strange sounds began emanating from the woods, not the typical nocturnal symphony of a healthy forest, but something far more sinister. Low, rumbling growls that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The sound of massive paws padding through underbrush, circling their camp in an ever-tightening spiral. Dr. Chen found herself drawn to the edge of the clearing, where the firelight gave way to impenetrable shadow. Something was moving out there, something large and deliberate. She could feel its presence like a physical weight pressing against her consciousness, ancient and hungry and filled with a rage that transcended mortal understanding. The fire suddenly flared higher, casting dancing shadows that seemed to take on lives of their own. In those flickering moments between light and darkness, she saw it again, the bear, standing just beyond the tree line. But now she could see it more clearly, and what she saw defied every law of nature she had spent her career studying. The creature's body was translucent, as if it existed somewhere between the physical world and some other realm entirely. Its massive form rippled like heat waves, and where its paws touched the ground, the very earth seemed to wither and die. Most horrifying of all, she could see through its ghostly flesh to the forest beyond, but also to something else, glimpses of another place entirely, a realm of endless darkness where things that should not exist moved with predatory purpose. The phantom bear's green eyes locked onto hers across the clearing, and in that moment, she felt her sanity begin to fray at the edges. This was no mere animal, living or dead. This was something far older, far more terrible, a guardian of secrets that humanity was never meant to uncover. As the creature began to move toward the camp, its massive form gliding rather than walking, Dr. Chen opened her mouth to scream a warning to her colleagues. But before any sound could escape her lips, the bear's eyes flared with brilliant green fire, and the world around her began to shift and warp in ways that her mind struggled to comprehend. The last thing she saw before consciousness fled was the bear's mouth opening impossibly wide, revealing not teeth and tongue, but a swirling vortex of stars and darkness that seemed to contain the screaming souls of everyone who had ever dared to enter this cursed forest. Dr. Chen awakened to the acrid smell of smoke and the sound of her colleagues screaming. The campfire had died to glowing embers, but an unnatural green luminescence pulsed through the forest like a diseased heartbeat. She struggled to her feet, her mind reeling from fragmented memories of the phantom bear's impossible gaze, and stumbled toward the chaos erupting around their research station. 3 of the team members were missing. Their tents stood empty, sleeping bags still warm, personal belongings scattered as if their owners had simply evaporated mid-action. Dr. Martinez, the expedition zoologist, was on his knees beside the equipment trailer, his hands pressed against his temples, blood trickling from his nose as he muttered incoherently about the spaces between spaces and doors that should never be opened. The remaining team members huddled together near the dying fire, their faces pale with terror. Graduate student Thompson pointed toward the forest with a trembling finger. "It took them," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind that had begun to howl through the trees with supernatural fury. "The bear, it walked right through the tents. Right through them. And when it touched them, they just faded away." Dr. Chen followed his gaze and felt her blood turn to ice. The phantom bear stood at the edge of the clearing, but now it was not alone. Flanking it on either side were the translucent forms of other creatures, wolves with eyes like burning coals, ravens whose wings seemed to be made of living shadow, and something that might once have been a deer but now resembled a twisted amalgamation of bone and spectral flesh. All of them bore the same otherworldly luminescence, all of them watched the survivors with an intelligence that spoke of purposes beyond mortal comprehension. But it was what stood behind this ghostly menagerie that truly shattered their sanity. Tall, impossibly thin figures that seemed to be constructed from starlight and void, their elongated limbs moving with fluid grace that defied anatomy. These beings, for lack of a better word, observed the scene with what appeared to be scientific detachment, as if the humans were nothing more than specimens in some cosmic experiment. The phantom bear began to move forward, and with each step, reality seemed to bend around it. The very air shimmered and warped, creating pockets of space where the laws of physics held no sway. Through these tears in the fabric of existence, glimpses of other worlds became visible, landscapes of impossible geometry, skies filled with alien constellations, and cities that hurt to look upon directly. Dr. Chen realized with growing horror that the forest itself was changing. The trees were becoming translucent, their bark taking on the same spectral quality as the phantom animals. The ground beneath their feet felt increasingly insubstantial, as if they were standing on the surface of a dream that was slowly dissolving into nightmare. "The research," Dr. Martinez suddenly gasped, his eyes focusing with desperate clarity. "The electromagnetic readings we took yesterday, the anomalous energy signatures, this place isn't just haunted. It's a convergence point. A place where multiple dimensions intersect." The alien figures behind the phantom bear seemed to react to his words, their attention sharpening with predatory interest. One of them raised what might have been an arm, and the air around the survivors began to thicken, becoming viscous like liquid mercury. Breathing became difficult, each inhalation requiring tremendous effort. The phantom bear's mouth opened again, revealing that swirling vortex of stars and screaming darkness. But this time, sounds emerged, not roars or growls, but something far more terrifying. Voices. Human voices. The voices of everyone who had ever disappeared in these woods, stretching back centuries, all crying out in unison from whatever hellish dimension they had been dragged into. Among those voices, Dr. Chen heard her missing colleagues, their words distorted by distance and dimensional barriers but still recognizable. They were begging for help, pleading for rescue, describing horrors that existed beyond the boundaries of human language. But underneath their desperate cries was something else, a growing acceptance, a terrible understanding that they were becoming part of something vast and alien and utterly inimical to human existence. The spectral wolves began to circle the survivors, their paws leaving trails of withered vegetation in their wake. Where they passed, the very essence of life seemed to drain away, leaving behind a gray, lifeless wasteland that spread outward like a cancer. The phantom ravens took to the air, their shadow wings blotting out the stars and creating a dome of absolute darkness above the clearing. Dr. Chen felt her consciousness beginning to fragment as the alien presence pressed against her mind. Images flooded her awareness, visions of Earth as seen from impossible distances, of humanity as nothing more than a brief flicker in a cosmic timeline that stretched across eons. She saw the truth behind the phantom bear and its spectral companions. They were not ghosts in any traditional sense, but rather interdimensional entities that had been drawn to this convergence point by forces beyond human understanding. The bear was their guardian, their herald, their instrument of collection. For millennia, it had been gathering specimens, not just humans, but representatives of every species that had ever lived in these woods. All of them were being preserved, studied, catalogued by intelligences so vast and alien that human minds could barely perceive their existence. As the phantom bear drew closer, its green eyes blazing with otherworldly fire, Dr. Chen understood that their expedition had been no accident. They had been lured here, drawn by carefully manipulated data and subtle influences that had guided their research toward this exact location at this precise moment in time. The convergence was accelerating, the barriers between dimensions growing thinner with each passing second. Soon, this pocket of forest would cease to exist in any recognizable form, becoming instead a gateway through which the alien collectors could extend their reach into the human world. The phantom bear was now close enough that she could see the swirling galaxies within its translucent flesh, could hear the whispered secrets of 1,000 dead civilizations echoing from its impossible throat. As it reached out with one massive, spectral paw, reality began to unravel completely around them. The phantom bear's spectral paw passed through Dr. Chen's chest like ice-cold fire, and suddenly she was no longer standing in the forest clearing. She found herself suspended in a vast interdimensional void, surrounded by swirling galaxies and geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly. Around her, floating in crystalline pods of energy, were the missing members of her team, alive but transformed, their bodies becoming translucent as they slowly merged with the alien collectors' incomprehensible technology. Through the dimensional barrier, she could still see the forest, but now she understood its true nature. The entire woodland was a massive organic computer, its trees serving as neural pathways for an intelligence so ancient that it predated the formation of Earth's solar system. The phantom bear was merely its avatar, a manifestation designed to interact with three-dimensional beings who lacked the capacity to perceive its true form. The alien collectors moved through the void with purpose, their elongated forms shifting between states of matter as they tended to countless specimens from across the universe. Dr. Chen watched in horror as she recognized creatures from Earth's distant past, dinosaurs, early mammals, even primitive humans, all preserved in the same crystalline pods, their consciousness intact but forever separated from their original reality. But something was wrong. The collectors' movements had become agitated, their usual scientific detachment replaced by what could only be described as panic. Through the dimensional membrane, she could see why. The forest convergence was destabilizing, the carefully maintained barriers between worlds beginning to collapse in ways that even these cosmic entities couldn't control. The phantom bear let out a roar that shattered the boundaries between dimensions, and suddenly Dr. Chen was back in the clearing, gasping as reality reasserted itself around her. But the forest had changed dramatically. The trees were now completely translucent, their ghostly forms revealing the alien machinery that had always existed within them. The ground beneath their feet had become a mirror-like surface that reflected not their own images, but glimpses of the countless worlds that intersected at this point. Her surviving colleagues were scattered across the clearing, some unconscious, others staring in catatonic terror at the impossible sights surrounding them. Dr. Martinez was on his feet, but his body flickered between solid and translucent, as if he was caught between dimensions. When he spoke, his voice echoed with harmonics that suggested multiple versions of himself speaking in unison. "They're losing control," he said, his words carrying knowledge that shouldn't have been possible for a human mind to contain. The convergence was supposed to be gradual, controlled. But something has gone wrong. The barriers are collapsing too quickly. Above them, the sky had become a kaleidoscope of alien stars and impossible geometries. Massive shapes moved through the cosmic void, beings so vast that entire galaxies served as their organs, their attention now focused on the failing experiment taking place in this remote corner of Earth. Their displeasure was palpable, a psychic pressure that threatened to crush the human survivors beneath its weight. The phantom bear began to change, its form becoming more solid even as it grew larger. Its green eyes blazed with desperate fury as it realized that its carefully maintained role as guardian was becoming obsolete. The convergence could no longer be contained or controlled, it was becoming a full-scale dimensional breach that would consume not just the forest, but potentially the entire planet. Around the clearing, more spectral animals began to materialize, but these were different from before. They were the original inhabitants of this place, the creatures that had been collected over millennia, and they were fighting back. Ghostly wolves tore at the alien machinery hidden within the trees, phantom ravens dove at the elongated collectors with beaks that could pierce dimensional barriers, and spectral deer charged through the void with antlers that sparked with interdimensional energy. Dr. Chen realized that the collected specimens had retained more of their original consciousness than the aliens had anticipated. They had been learning, adapting, preparing for this moment when the convergence would become unstable enough for them to act. The phantom bear, despite being the collector's avatar, was also a prisoner, the consciousness of an ancient grizzly that had been the first creature taken from this forest centuries ago. The battle between the spectral animals and their alien captors raged across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Reality twisted and warped as the conflict spilled over into the physical world. Trees exploded into fragments of light and shadow, the ground cracked open to reveal swirling vortexes that led to other worlds, and the air itself became thick with the screams of dying stars. Dr. Chen felt herself being pulled in multiple directions as the dimensional barriers continued to collapse. Part of her consciousness was still in the void with the crystalline pods, part was in the forest clearing, and part was scattered across a dozen other realities where different versions of this same battle were taking place. She could see infinite variations of herself, some where she had never come to the forest, others where she had been the first to be collected, and still others where humanity had never evolved at all. The phantom bear turned its attention to her, and she saw something in its green eyes that she hadn't noticed before: recognition. Not just of her as an individual, but of her species' potential. The alien collectors had underestimated humanity's capacity for adaptation and resistance, just as they had underestimated the other creatures they had gathered over the eons. With a roar that shattered the last remaining barriers between dimensions, the phantom bear charged directly at the largest of the alien collectors. Its spectral form blazed with the accumulated rage of every creature that had ever been taken from its natural habitat, every consciousness that had been imprisoned in the cosmic zoo. The collision sent shockwaves through the fabric of reality itself, creating tears in space-time that revealed the true scope of the collector's operation. Dr. Chen saw worlds upon worlds, each one stripped of its native life and converted into collection points for the alien intelligence. Earth was just one of countless planets that had been slowly harvested over millions of years, its most interesting specimens preserved while the rest of the ecosystem was allowed to continue evolving to produce new varieties for collection. But now the entire network was failing. The phantom bear's rebellion had triggered a cascade effect that was spreading across the dimensional matrix, freeing imprisoned consciousnesses on 1,000 different worlds. The collector's vast intelligence was fragmenting under the strain of trying to maintain control over so many simultaneous uprisings. As the forest around them began to dissolve completely, Dr. Chen felt herself being pulled toward one of the dimensional tiers. Through it, she could see her missing colleagues, no longer trapped in crystalline pods but standing free in a realm that existed between worlds. They were calling to her, their voices carrying across the dimensional divide with urgent warnings about what was coming next. The phantom bear's sacrifice had bought them time, but the convergence was still accelerating beyond all control. Soon, the barriers between all realities would collapse completely, creating a cosmic catastrophe that would merge every dimension into a single, chaotic maelstrom where the laws of physics would cease to have any meaning. As she was pulled through the dimensional tear, Dr. Chen's last sight of the forest was the phantom bear standing triumphant over the shattered remains of its alien captors, its green eyes now blazing with the light of 1,000 liberated souls. Dr. Chen tumbled through the dimensional tear into a realm where gravity held no meaning and time flowed in spirals rather than straight lines. Her missing colleagues surrounded her, their forms now stabilized between dimensions, no longer fully human but not yet completely alien. They had become something new, interdimensional beings capable of existing in multiple realities simultaneously, and their eyes held knowledge that spanned eons. "The convergence cannot be stopped," Dr. Martinez said, his voice echoing from past and future versions of himself. "But it can be redirected." The Phantom Bear showed us the way, not through destruction, but through transformation. Around them, the liberated consciousnesses of countless species swirled in a cosmic dance of rebellion. The alien collectors' network was collapsing across the universe, but the dimensional barriers were failing so rapidly that reality itself was beginning to unravel. Stars were going supernova in distant galaxies as the fabric of spacetime stretched beyond its breaking point. Dr. Chen could see Earth through the dimensional membrane, and what she witnessed filled her with both terror and awe. The forest had become a massive portal, its boundaries expanding outward at an exponential rate. Cities were being consumed by the growing anomaly, their inhabitants transformed into interdimensional beings like herself and her colleagues. But rather than dying, they were evolving, adapting to exist in the new reality that was rapidly replacing the old one. The Phantom Bear materialized beside them, its form now blazing with the combined consciousness of every creature that had ever been collected. It was no longer just a guardian or an avatar, it had become something unprecedented, a fusion of organic and cosmic intelligence that existed beyond the comprehension of both its former captors and its liberated prisoners. The collectors made one fatal error. The bear spoke, its voice containing the harmonics of 1,000 species. They believed consciousness could be contained, catalogued, controlled. But consciousness is the fundamental force of the universe. It cannot be imprisoned, only transformed. Through the dimensional void, Dr. Chen watched as the alien collectors' vast intelligence began to fragment completely. Their elongated forms dissolved into streams of pure thought that scattered across the cosmos, seeking new hosts, new realities to inhabit. But they were no longer the dominant force they had once been. The rebellion had stripped them of their technological advantages, reducing them to refugees fleeing through dimensions they could no longer control. The Phantom Bear turned its attention to Earth, where the convergence was reaching its final phase. The planet's surface was becoming translucent, revealing the interdimensional machinery that had been hidden beneath for millennia. Oceans boiled away into cosmic vapor, mountains crumbled into geometric patterns that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and the atmosphere itself began to sing with frequencies that rewrote the laws of physics. But humanity was not dying, it was transcending. Dr. Chen watched as billions of people underwent the same transformation she had experienced, their consciousness expanding to encompass multiple realities while their physical forms adapted to exist in the new interdimensional matrix. Children were the first to adapt, their minds more flexible and accepting of the impossible changes occurring around them. The Phantom Bear began to move toward Earth, and Dr. Chen realized its true purpose. It was not just a guardian of the forest, it was a guardian of consciousness itself, a protector of the fundamental right of all sentient beings to exist free from cosmic tyranny. The alien collectors had violated that principle on a universal scale, and now they were paying the price for their hubris. As the bear approached the planet, its form began to merge with the expanding convergence zone. The forest that had started this cosmic revolution became the seat of something entirely new, a hybrid reality where organic consciousness and cosmic intelligence could coexist without one dominating the other. The trees, now existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, became conduits for communication between species separated by vast distances and incompatible biologies. Dr. Chen felt herself being drawn back toward Earth, but not to the planet she had left. This was a new world, one where the boundaries between life and death, matter and energy, individual and collective consciousness had become fluid and permeable. The Phantom Bear's sacrifice had not just freed the collected specimens, it had fundamentally altered the nature of existence itself. She found herself standing in what had once been the forest clearing, but now existed as a nexus point connecting infinite realities. Her colleagues were there, along with the missing team members who had been the first to be transformed. Around them, the spectral animals that had fought alongside the Phantom Bear were taking on new forms, becoming ambassadors between the various species that now shared this interdimensional space. The Phantom Bear appeared one final time, its massive form now encompassing the entire transformed forest. Its green eyes, once filled with alien fire, now blazed with the warm light of organic consciousness freed from cosmic oppression. When it spoke, its voice carried the gratitude of every liberated soul across the universe. "The guardianship passes to you now," it said, addressing not just Dr. Chen and her team, but all of transformed humanity. "You have seen what happens when consciousness is imprisoned, cataloged, controlled. Ensure that it never happens again." With those words, the phantom bear began to dissolve, its essence spreading throughout the new reality like seeds on cosmic wind. But it was not dying, it was becoming part of the fundamental structure of the transformed universe, a permanent guardian against any future attempts to cage the infinite potential of conscious thought. Dr. Chen looked around at the impossible beauty of their new existence. Humans, animals, and even some of the reformed alien collectors worked together to build something unprecedented, a truly free cosmos where consciousness could evolve and explore without fear of imprisonment or exploitation. The forest had become a symbol of that freedom, its interdimensional trees reaching across space and time to connect every sentient being in a network of voluntary cooperation rather than forced servitude. As she watched children from a dozen different species play together in meadows that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, Dr. Chen understood that the phantom bear's greatest victory was not the destruction of the collector's network, but the creation of something better to replace it. The universe had been transformed from a cosmic zoo into a cosmic garden, where consciousness could grow and flourish in ways that no single intelligence, no matter how vast, could ever fully comprehend or control. The forest's darkest guardian had become its greatest liberator, and in doing so, had freed not just Earth, but existence itself. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Also, share this video with your friends, it really helps a lot. Raising hands. If I made any mistake in the video, I sincerely apologize, feel free to correct me in the comments. And let me know in the comments, what should I improve in future videos? Your feedback means a lot. Speech balloon. See you in the next one, take care and keep learning.